Hello and welcome to part one of the music theory series I will be posting here on YouTube. Part one is going to be focused on rhythm. So let's get started. Now, this first section here is actually not really part of the rhythm stuff, it's just a general information that I think would be useful. What you're looking at here is a staff on the top, and as well as a different staff on the bottom, but both have 5 lines and both have 4 spaces. The things that really make these two different staves here are the symbols up to the left. I will focus on those in the next part, so stay tuned for that. And let's move on here. When you combine these two staves here, you get what is called the grand staff, which is what is used when playing instruments like the piano or the harp or many other type of keyboard instruments or anything that really has a large range, and it needs those two staves there. But once again, I'll be going over that in the next part. Now this is where the rhythm section really starts in this video. You can see here on the top staff there we have different types of notes and their names underneath. The circles that you see, or ovals, whatever you like to call them, are called the note heads. And then the lines that most of them have are called stems. You can see the whole note there does not have a stem, and I'll go over that in a moment. And then all the way at the right end, you see the 8th note has a little thing coming off the top of its stem. That is called a flag, and I'll go over that when we get to the 8th note. Let's continue on. The quarter note. The quarter note is the note that has a completely blackened in note head and a stem extending from it. The quarter note is typically the beat of the music. This isn't always the case, but in most popular music, it's going to be the beat. What I mean by the beat, which can be taken in different ways really, but what I mean by that is you can feel it when you're clapping along with the song or stomping your feet. That is the beat that you're clapping to. What I'm going to be using here is a set of 4 numbers that you see 1, 2, 3, 4, because the starting place for music theory is in the time signature, which I'll go over later on in a different video, but it's 4/4, which means there's 4 beats in a measure. That's all you really need to know for this part. So a quarter note takes up one of those beats, so there's 4 in a measure in that case. What this would sound like would be 1, 2, 3, 4. I was counting the numbers and clapping the quarter notes. So that is what a quarter note is. A half note, as the name would kind of suggest, is going to be twice as big as a quarter note. So let's take an example. You can think of it in ways of fractions or in money and like coins. Same kind of idea. Quarter, whether it be like a physical quarter coin or just fraction quarter, it's going to be like 25% or 25 cents, which is a quarter of a whole dollar, which is what the whole note is going to be. Half note would be half of the whole dollar, which is going to be like 50 cents, which is twice as big as the quarter. So half note is going to last twice as long as the quarter note. So as you can see here, the half note will only has 2 in the same space that the quarter note had 4. That's because the half note is held out longer, twice as long. So what this would sound like, I'm going to count the numbers again and clap what the half notes are. So that would be 1, 2, 3, 4. So as you can see, the really only difference in physically how the half note looks compared to the quarter note is that it has that kind of hollowed out circle for the note head as compared to the quarter note that has the black and thin. So that is the half note. The whole note, as you can see by looking at it, looks a lot like the half note, except it does not have the stem coming out of it. It's just the circle or oval, and that is all. The whole note lasts twice as long as the half note, or 4 times as long as the quarter note. Just to give you an example, I will clap the whole note and count the beats. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's all that one is, just on that first beat. It starts and it's held out throughout all 4 beats. The 8th note is actually smaller than the quarter note. So with the quarter note, we had quarter on every beat, 1, 2, 3, 4. Because it has half the duration of the quarter note, it requires there to be an 8th note in between the beats as well as on the beat. In order to count this, we add in the word "and" in between each beat or number there. So what this would sound like when counting the beats and the 8th notes in between the beats would be this: 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. Now if you just counted the beats, it would sound like this: 1, 2, 3, 4. So the 8th note looks very similar to the quarter note, but it has that flag coming out on top, as you see in the left hand side, and on the right hand side is something different, which I'll explain now. On the left hand side is what an 8th note would look like if it was just by itself, just an 8th note without another 8th note right next to it. On the right hand side is how you would see it if you had 2 8th notes right next to each other, is how most of the time they will look, unless the composer decides to change it for some reason. But whenever there are 2 8th notes next to each other, most of the time they will have that kind of bridge in between the notes there. Now you may be asking yourself, well, a half note gets me 2 beats, whole note gets me 4, what if you wanted 3 beats? That is where dotted rhythms, or tied rhythms, come in. What you're seeing here are the dotted rhythms. I'll also be going over the tied. A dotted rhythm takes the original length of the note plus half of the original length, and that's how you get the dotted rhythm. So a dotted quarter note has the original length of 1 beat, and then half of that is half a beat, like an 8th note, and at the end you get 1.5 beats from that dotted quarter there. At the bottom of the screen I show a tied example of this. That squiggly line there is called a tie. So you have a quarter and then you have an 8th, but you don't play it like 1 and 2 and. You would play as 1 and 2, and there would also then and would continue on, but that's how long it would go. You just hit it on that first quarter and then hold it out for the entire length of the quarter and the entire length of the 8th. Now ties can also happen in areas that dotted rhythms don't fit. What I mean by that is, if you for some reason wanted to tie, let's say, a whole note and a quarter note, that wouldn't fit into this formula of original length and the half of the original length to equal out at the end for a dotted rhythm. So you could tie a whole note to a quarter note or an 8th note, whatever you would like to do to make the desired length of the rhythm you want. But I'm just showing you here the equivalent of what is the dotted quarter to the tied version of that. Now here's the dotted half note, which is original length 2 beats, and then you take half of that, which is 1, and that's how you get 3 beats. And at the bottom, the tied version is half note and tied to a quarter. The dotted whole note, the original length is 4 beats, half of that is 2, and in the end you get 6 beats. And the tied version is a whole note tied to a half note. The eighth note is half a beat, and half of that is a quarter of a beat, so in the end the dotted rhythm is equivalent to 3/4 of a beat. Now, this is where the flags come into play that I was talking about attached to the stem. The eighth note has one flag to show that it's an eighth note, and then what is called the 16th note, which is twice as fast or half the duration of the eighth note, has 2 flags. And this system continues on basically forever, depending on what kind of composition it is. Some people use really crazy rhythms, but so you can just keep adding flags and making it go faster and faster. Basically, you have an eighth note with one flag, you add another flag and cut it in half and you get a 16th note, you add another flag, cut that in half and you get a 32nd note, and you can just keep going and going. So what looks like a quarter note with 2 flags there is a 16th note, or a quarter of a beat. And that's what could be tied to an eighth note to get the equivalent of a dotted eighth note. Okay, that was the first part of the music theory series. The next part 2, will be focused on pitch, where I'll go over things like the clefs I was talking about, as well as how to read the notes on the staff. Please subscribe to get all the updates from the music theory series.